Hey YouTube, it's Ken Johnson. Today we're going to be doing my Dark Elf Mead. In case you've never had a mead before, it's a honey wine. It's what we consider to be the OG of alcohol. It is what your ancestors drank thousands of years ago when they were getting drunk. It goes counterintuitive to way fermenting works and way nature works, because you actually have to dilute honey down, which is an antimicrobial to begin with, and you got to dilute it down enough that you can ferment it. And so I'm going to be pulling out some tricks, and I'm going to be using some new gadgets I got for Christmas, and we're just going to have fun with this mead. I'll end up then make it into a sparkling, I'm hoping session strength. Session strength just means kind of the same strength as beer or something like that, where you would just be casually drinking. So this will not be my normal high alcohol by volume, but it'll be a decent alcohol amount. I'm going to be using bread yeast. And I'll explain why I use bread yeast. It really has some benefits to fermentation that people overlook and downplay. And I think it doesn't get the credit it deserves. And so I'm going to be using that. And it's got some unique herbs and spices in it that I think you'll really like. It gives a unique flavor. So come along and watch as we make my Dark Elf Mead. So just a quick word about invert sugars. Now I'm going to do a process that I'm going to mention about invert sugars, but I'm talking about honey. And yes, honey is an invert sugar. But what I was trying to get at is that not all honeys are the same. Bees, they secrete a chemical called invertase, and it creates a invert sugar out of the honey, but not all the honey is the same, and not every honey is the same. So you can have the same type, say clover honey, and it vary dramatically. So that's what I meant by this. It's just a precautionary measure. It is not something that I'm saying I'm taking invert sugar and inverting it more. I'm saying that if that honey had any non-inverted sugars in it, it will with this process. And it's a nice little trick to know when you're dealing with regular sugar. All you gotta do is add some acid and boil it, and it'll make it into an inverted sugar. But I just wanted to explain that. To do my Dark Elf Mead, the first thing we need to do is add 44 ounces of honey that has been heated up to 3/4 of a cup, or 3/4 of a gallon of water. One of the first things you'll notice is that there's a skim, or there's a film that forms. This because this is a unfiltered honey. And so first thing you want to do is take your spoon and get off as much of this film as you can. And so I'm not using best spoon word. I'm going to change over to another spoon and get all this off. And then as this boils, more impurities will come out of your honey. This is an old-timey way of doing mead. This is not the traditional, or not traditional, contemporary way of making mead. This is the way that used to be done a long time ago. So I'll show you how this is done in just a moment. Be right back. One way you can get the center part to do what it's supposed to do is also to stir it a little bit, and that'll help you a little bit, and just put it right under the center part that's swirling, and you can get extra that way. Still getting scummy stuff off the top. Still getting scummy stuff off the top. And in case anybody asks, I'm using Sally's Wildflower Honey out of Chipley, Florida. It's what they had at my local grocery store, so that's what I used. With this method, you're not really trying to preserve the flavor of the honey. This is actually an old-timey method. This is not the contemporary way of making mead. So, it's a little bit different process, so you don't need the best honey in the world. Now, your eyes are not deceiving you. As this heats up, you get more scum comes up. There's a lot of impurities in honey, and so I'm needing to get all the impurities out. If you don't, it creates a film on the bottom similar to lees, especially if you pasteurize this. And so I plan on pasteurizing it possibly, and so I want to use this process, but you can look and see how much foam is developing already, and it's just growing as I make this video. We have boilage now, so I've turned off the heat, and you can see I'm still foaming up like crazy. I've got almost an entire bowl full of foam that I'm still skimming off here. And this is what you got to do. You got to skim off all the foam. So we'll continue with this process, and I'll keep you alerted as things progress. Now the mead is running clear. I'm going to just try to get off any residual scum that might be coming up from a harder boil, and I'll be right back. And this right here is the bowl full of scum that I got off of it. What's so funny about this is the more I boil it, the more scum forms. This just takes forever to do. Probably the reason why people stop doing it. Okay, I have 4 of my lemons. I got 1.5 cups of lemon juice. And I'm pouring this in now. Now, some of y'all be asking me, why are you doing this? The answer is simple. I'm using science. I am making an inverted sugar. And so this is going to be breaking down all the sugars in the honey into their base elements of fructose and glucose. So that's the reason why I'm doing this. As you can see, the lemons have created a reaction causing more foaming. This needs to cook for another 15 to 20 minutes. I'll skim it off and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, it's been boiling away now for a while. I'm adding in a 1/2 cup of grated ginger. To this, I'm adding in 4 tablespoons of lemon zest from my lemons. Now adding in 12 ounces of frozen blackberries in. I'm adding in 1 ounce of raisins to the mix. The raisins really are not as a nutrient supplement as they are for the tannins and additional flavors. For the yeast nutrient, we're going to be using Fleshman's dry yeast. This is just a baker's yeast. So yeast are carnivorous, and actual dead yeast is a fantastic yeast nutrient. So this will be my yeast nutrient for this mix. Because this is a dark elf mead, I'm using McCormick's Peppercorn Medley, which is actually white peppercorn, black peppercorn, coriander seed, and allspice. And so it's going to be about a tablespoon of that added in. Now I'm adding in about a teaspoon of rosemary. So that will give it the woodsy flavor and make it elf. Blackberry is, of course, dark elf, and also the science behind it. all the counterintuitive flavors, the pepper, all that, that makes it dark elf. The last element in my brew is 2 small bay leaves. So they will be in here. I've turned off the heat. I'm going to let this steep for a little bit, and then I'm going to put it in the refrigerator, cool overnight. Then I'll take my immersion blender. We'll zap this with the immersion blender, and I will put it into 2 1-gallon fermenters. I'll dilute it some with water because it's already right strong now, so I want to get where it's not so strong. And we'll take a reading on it as well. See you in a minute. So now we're going to go ahead and use our hand mixer or immersion blender to bring this up, or to actually blend this up into a puree. In hindsight, that was a horrible idea. The strands from the ginger bound up the immersion blender, and I had it way too full and got this mess all over me, so don't do that. Okay, so one of the other things I've done is brought this back to a boil. I've let it sit overnight, brought it back to a boil, and then I removed any skim that might be on top, any foam that might developed on top, so that I've got as clear a liquid as possible. I'll run this through a sieve, and I'll show you that process in a little bit. So in the next step of this, I've omitted filming me sieving out the fluid, but that's what I did. I used a ridiculously small strainer, and I just didn't think you need to be bothered by it. One of the problems that a lot of people tell me is that they really don't know how their meat is going to ferment out. And there is a way that you can sort of kind of do a guesstimate of how it's going to ferment out. If you know what your yeast will be doing roughly, the best thing to do is to go ahead and put a, like mine, I'm using bread yeast, so I do a 1 to 3. And so that'll give me about what it would be like at about a 10% APV. So with that in mind, I tasted it and I thought it needed more lemon. So right here you see I've got lemon, and I'm going to sieve this out. And so I put 1 Meyer lemon, and if you remember, 4 of these Meyer lemons did 1.5 cups, so that kind of lets you guesstimate how much lemon juice I'm putting in this. And so I'm just squeezing this out, not trying to get all of it in the world. My hands have been cleaned, everything's been sanitized. Now I don't use Star San. I know a lot of people use Star San, and I'm not dogging the company, but I have issues with Star San. Mainly I hear some crazy stuff on YouTube, people saying, oh, it's used in hospitals and it's used in this and it's used in that. Nah, I'm not going to say that it's not, but it ain't supposed to be. The uses for it are extremely limited. And the way it sanitizes, mostly from what I've researched and read based off of their own research data and from the federal government, is that it uses an acidic compound to basically sanitize, basically the same way vinegar water would do. I worked in the healthcare profession for a little while, and the gold standard is what I've used all my life, because I was doing this well before YouTube ever came along, before the internet came along. And so what we used to use a long time ago is bleach. And I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, sorry about that. We have some idiots that drive big trucks around this road. But anyway, what I was going to say is that we have, some people said, oh, my brews went bad because I used bleach. Well, then when I talked to them or I researched in deeper into how much they were using for their bleach solution, it was minimal. It was so small it wasn't enough to kill anything. You need about a 30% bleach solution to really kill anything. Some people would say 20%, but problem is the more you dilute it, it's the amount of time that you allow it on something and to stay on something that kills it. So 30%, you need at least 2 minutes of it sitting in bleach solution to kill it. And then if you go any other chemical, that number goes up. So like when you're disinfecting an area and you put like Lysol or something else, it's a 4-minute wet time. If it dries before then, it's not sanitizing anymore. So you need to understand how sanitizers work. That's the reason why I use bleach. So next thing we're going to do is I'm going to pitch in some yeast, and I'll be right back because I forgot the yeast. Okay, so I am putting in a whole packet of bread yeast. Now everybody's going to be saying, oh, he's using bread yeast. He's doing it some old hick way. Well, that's what people used a long time ago. In all truth, all yeast produces alcohol. So, I've talked about this before. Bread yeast will actually give you a more true flavor characteristic of your fruits and your base and your must than your wine yeast will. So I know I like to use champagne yeast. One of the reasons why people dislike champagne yeast so much is that they say it destroys the flavor compounds of the must. That it's just chewing through so fast. Another thing, and I just watched this wonderful interview with a professional mead maker, and he was talking about that he judges competitions, and people didn't know what the new mead taste was or whatever, and they just had it classified as new mead or new tasting. But that yeasty taste that people get is normally because they underpitch. So I'm actually adding a bunch of yeast in this case because you cannot overpitch. And I'm also I added in the dead yeast hulls, which was really live yeast that I boiled and killed because they're carnivorous. So that's the yeast nutrient. And so what I'm doing now is I'm just incorporating some air, and I'm also getting this acclimated to this must. Now, this is not the final must. I've got 3 quarts. And so what I've got is 2 1-gallon fermenters. So I'm going to add a gallon to this. If my calculations is right, I should come out with just shy of 2 gallons of must. So I'm going to half this into the 2 gallon fermenters, and then after I half it, then I'm going to add my water, and once I get that equalized and about the same, I'll take me a starting gravity, because I have a brand new hydrometer. I rant and rave about the refractometers, and then I've kind of spoken negatively about hydrometers. Hydrometers, they give false readings, but in this case, I'm going to start using it. It gives me a Brix reading, gives me a bunch of other good stuff, so this is a good hydrometer I'm using. But then I'm going to come back later and I'll compare my hydrometer reading with my refractometer, because I also got a refractometer, and so we'll go from there. So let's get the next set started. And of course I'm going to be just doing this the slowest way possible, but I'm just showing you that I am adding in the must, and we'll continue on with this. While I'm doing this, some people might be thinking, oh, you're just guessing. I'm actually not. You can't see it on this bowl here, but I have raised ridges on the inside of this bowl, and it tells me where my volume is. So I'm actually at just below the 2 quart mark right now, and once it goes to 1.5 quarts, I will know that I'm at my right level. And despite what little tablespoon of spillage I'm doing by this, which is the most ineffective way possible, I will know that I have one. In fact, I'm right at that point now. So this is 1.5 quarts. I know that for a fact. So even though it don't look like it, just by looking at this right here, I know that I've got it. So we're going to fill up next, and we'll be ready to go on to the next step. Okay, now it's time to fill up the water. And again, I'm using my gauge. Always use your gauges. Don't do it by eyesight if you can get away with it. I've done it before, but it's better to have gauges. Be with you just a second. Now the next step is to put the cap on here and shake it up. You need to shake this up for a while. So what we're doing is we're adding air in. A lot of people are like, oh, you can't add in air to a wine or mead because that will actually cause it to oxidize and give off flavors and all that. I'll be doing a sherry wine episode in the future where I'm showing how to oxidize and what it takes to oxidize and why we oxidize. But long story short, this is actually good to do this in the beginning stages. You don't want to do it towards the end. You only want to do this in the beginning. But if you do it in the beginning stages, it gives the yeast time to get some oxygen and start work before they switch over to anaerobic environment. And so this is when you can actually have some of your best fermenting done, is right here when you're incorporating air. So I'm going to continue doing this. It'll be a while. I'll be with you when I'm done. Now it's time to take a hydrometer reading. So I'm using a turkey baster that I use as a dedicated wine thief. They make these turkey basters for brew shops. I got this at Dollar Tree. It really doesn't matter as long as you get something that is only used for wine. Do not use it for cooking and wine. You can get oils on there. Even though yeast need a small amount of oils, you want to control what type of oils you put in there, like plant oils from your oranges or lemons or whatever you're adding in. You don't want to just put any kind of oils or expose it to any type of compounds that, you know, may not be conducive to good winemaking. So, and unfortunately this is a small volume. The brew types, they have better varieties. Move this off to the side. I'm floating now. Okay, I have a starting gravity of 1.060. So with that starting gravity, what you do is you'll take the starting gravity, or what they call the OG, and then you will subtract it by the final gravity and multiply it by a number There's different coefficients you can use. I'll show you mine when I'm done with this project. And that gives you an estimated alcohol volume. Now, the refractometer works off of a different principle. I'll have to calibrate my refractometer, and once it's calibrated, it'll read the final alcohol percentage. So I'll check based off of the hydrometer and the refractometer to show what these two are. But right now I'm going to double check, make sure both batches are at the same starting gravity. Okay, we have fermentation started. So now we should have about 21 days. I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit and see if we can get some of that. You can see them bubbles. That's what I wanted to show you, is those bubbles forming up. You can see them on the sides. And so every day now for about 3 or 4 days, I'll be just kind of swirling this brew around. It'll get a Croissant level right here, and then at the very bottom there'll be a sediment layer, what some people call the lees or lees. It's L-E-E-S. So if you ever hear somebody say the lees or somebody say the lees, it's just a difference in pronunciation. It is basically a sediment layer caused by the fermentation process. And so, and the Croissant is just stuff that builds up. It's a natural part of the fermentation process. Right now it seems a little cloudy. It'll probably be cloudy when I'm done with it. And then I'll do a thing called cold racking. Some people call it cold crashing. And that is a way that I'll filter it. So if you ever heard of cold filtered beer, same process. It is a filtration process, basically causing something called flocculation, which is basically getting debris to fall out of solution. And so that's what we're doing here. And once I do that, I will check the ABV, alcohol by volume. We'll do the ABV, find out where it's at. I may need to do a thing called back sweetening. That means I'll add honey if I need to bring it up. And then I may or may not, based off of the ABV, need to add more yeast. So I'm hoping that I'll get the right ABV and the right gravity, because we see here 1.060 gravity, and hopefully I'll get enough gravity that I have enough sugars in there to ferment out, and that hopefully it'll be from back sweetening. I'm hoping that these yeast will eat up everything. It'll go to 1.0. That's my goal, but you never know with yeast. Yeast cannot read. And bread yeast, I've seen it get up higher than 10%. I've seen it get higher than 13%. So you can do that. So anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for support. And I will see you next time. Bye.